Hello, everyone. It's time for another episode of The Michael Shermer Show. I am your host, Michael Shermer. This is a special episode. I don't have a guest today. I'm just doing some commentary. I'm going to add probably at least one commentary a week or every 2 weeks, depending on what's going on in society and what I have to offer to say anything about it. This one's going to be on what is a woman anyway? I actually wrote one of my Skeptic columns on Substack almost a year ago on this subject, and it's only gotten crazier. So before I dive into that particular column, eventually reading it, I'm going to add some commentary at the beginning here when I said things have been getting crazier. Let me just start off by saying I do know some trans people. Deirdre McCloskey, I knew before she transitioned. She was Donald McCloskey back in the 90s. And, I'm not transphobe. I wish everybody the best that they can be and find happiness in any way they can. She has struggled, Deirdre has, and has written a memoir about this, rejection by her family and so on. It's heartbreaking. But that's different from the question of rights and treatment and the science behind transgenderism or transsexuality or whatever term we want to use. Let me just read here from a recent tweet that I posted. I'll read several tweets here just in the last couple of days, really maybe a week or two. Here I'm reading from an op-ed that was published in the New York Post, and I support this statement. In this country, people have a right to express their identity without fear of discrimination or reprisals. But that right does not and should not extend to participation in any activity they wish, particularly when that participation infringes on the rights of an entire class of citizens and threatens to erase more than 5 decades of progress. The editorial writer there is talking about trans men trans women, male to female trans, entering women's sports. I'll have more to say about that in a moment. Here's some more current events. The Representative Joe Miller of Ohio gave a press conference. Let's see, I'm recording this on Friday, April 20th. This was on the 14th. He held this conference in which he said that you can actually change biological sex. Yes. He's not talking about gender. He gives this press conference, says that you can actually change sex, and therefore men who identify as women are biological women, not men, and therefore it's okay for them to compete in women's sports divisions. This is what I wrote about that. Astonishing denial of the most basic of biological facts. He's not talking about gender. He's claiming that people can change their biological sex by transitioning. Wrong. A bio-male cannot will his body to generate fallopian tubes, produce eggs, grow a uterus, etc. This is utter madness. The madness continues. Here's the governor of Colorado who passed a law for safe haven, trans tourist safe haven in Colorado. New laws signed by the state's Democrat Governor Jared Polis mean that teens under the age of 18 from across the United States can travel to the state and undergo gender reassignment surgery and hormone replacement therapy without their parents' consent or even knowledge. This is celebrated. Here's what I wrote in my tweet. Dear Governor of Colorado, again, Jared Polis, will you explain to minor girls that after you cut off their breasts and pump them full of testosterone, that the gender reassignment process cannot be reversed? Teenagers do not know what they want, which is why parental consent for medical procedures is standard. Right, so here's another study I posted. This was on parents. This is a website, parents of ROGDkids.com. RODG is the rapid onset gender dysphoria hypothesis. Here's the quote from this study. The results of the largest survey to date on gender dysphoric adolescents support Dr. Littman's ROGD, again, rapid onset gender dysphoria hypothesis. These youths are most likely using gender dysphoria to describe general feelings of dysphoria that they have no other name for and do not understand. Transitioning will not help them. It can only cause irreversible harm and make things much worse. In other words, these are young teenagers going through adolescence and puberty and are confused. That's normal. What's not normal is to tell them that there is one cause of their depression, anxiety, and general dysphoria over their body, and that is they're in the wrong body. All they have to do is just switch bodies, as if you can do that, which you can't. But in any case, that's the theory behind it, and it's wrong, wrong, wrong. Here's another woman who's closed her Twitter after she posted this tweet. She posted a video. Now she's desisted back to being a boy. But anyway, here's what I wrote. Instead of growing up as a gay boy to become a gay man in a culture now accepting of gays, then I'm quoting him, this is the face and voice of a 30-year-old man who looks like a woman and talks like a woman at age 30, who was pressured to transition to a woman, did so secretly without parental consent, and now regrets it. There's a lot of these. I post them pretty much every couple times a week. Here's another tweet from a woman named Hadley Freeman, a British author. In this interview with Hadley Freeman, she talks about the link between anorexia and people wanting to change their gender. And it's important. It is an important component to what we're going through now with the spike in trans ID, particularly girls wanting to be boys. Hadley Freeman talks about this in this interview, as well as in her book, in which she talks about getting, as she became an adolescent, in her young teens, became anorexic. Her theory of anorexia, and I assume this is probably controversial, but this is her theory, is that as young girls become women and their bodies develop in adolescence, they become sexualized by men, by culture, etc. And they're uncomfortable with this. They don't know what to make of it. And so her theory, again, is that by practicing anorexia, they are, I guess, converting their bodies back to pre-adolescence and pre-puberty by just losing so much weight. Their breasts essentially disappear, their hips flatten out or straighten out, and so forth. She thinks this is an attempt by these young girls to not change genders or sex, but to deal with this confusion of their bodies. Okay, so then there's Riley Gaines. I've been following Riley Gaines. She is a world-class NCAA swimmer who competed against Leah Thomas. Leah Thomas claims to be a woman. She first competed for her first 3 years in college as a man and was not even in the top 400 nationally. Then transitions and is top of the sport and tied Riley Gaines in a competition. And Riley, to her credit, is not going to put up with this. The NCAA officials at the site of the competition asked her to let Leah take the limelight for the tie in this event, and she was none too happy about this. And here's what Riley Gaines posted on Twitter. Leah Thomas is not a brave, courageous woman who earned a national title. She is an arrogant cheat who stole a national title from a hardworking, deserving woman. The NCAA is responsible. If I was a woman working at ESPN, I would walk out. You are spineless, ESPN. Boycott ESPN. And then I posted another one of her tweets about how she was invited to speak at San Francisco State University and was mobbed, as you can imagine, cancel culture in full swing. And she was assaulted and had to be locked up in another classroom for her protection from the mob, and missed her flight home, was locked in there for several hours for her own safety. The campus police did nothing. And then the dean issued a statement apologizing to the mob for their being too upset. And in their statement, they're offering counseling services for our Gator community. Gators are the San Francisco State University team. Our Gator community, including faculty, staff members, coaches, and mentors, and the peaceful protesters, so that they may recover from assaulting Riley Gaines. This is what I wrote. This is a bizarro world. And here's what Riley posted on her Twitter. I'm sorry. Did this just say peaceful? I was assaulted. I was extorted and held for ransom. The protesters demanded that I pay them if I wanted to make it home safely. I missed my flight home because I was barricaded in a classroom. We must have different definitions of peaceful. Okay, this is insane. Here's another case posted yesterday on April 19th from the week before. There's a photograph. Windsor police are searching for a sexual assault suspect wanted in connection to a sexual assault reported on April 4th, 2023. The suspect has been identified as 32-year-old Desiree Anderson, who may also be known as Cody Entremont. There's a picture of him. I'll just say it. Long hair. He can identify whatever he wants, but he's got a nice thick 5 o'clock shadow and long hair. It looks like a guy. It is a guy. And he assaulted a woman. A female victim contacted police on April 4th to report that she had been sexually assaulted while staying at the Windsor Women's Shelter. Are you following this thread? This guy checked himself into a women's shelter and then sexually assaulted the women there. A woman there. The suspect is reported to have been staying at the shelter at the same time and allegedly climbed into the victim's bed and sexually assaulted her. Police say that the suspect is known to frequent the downtown area, has been identified as 32-year-old Desiree Anderson, also known as Cody Entremont. Okay. This just goes on and on. It's constant. Here's another one. No, that was it. That's enough for now. Okay, what is all this confusion about? What is a woman anyway? Let me now read from my Skeptic column, in which I address this question. It's not a hard question, but people are just hopelessly confused about this. In his 1953 book, Philosophical Investigations, the philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein introduced the concept of language games, in which he argued that concepts do not need perfect clarity for meaning to be found in them, with games as his type specimen. We speak of board games, card games, dice games, arcade games, athletic games, war games, betting games, drinking games, and even multiplayer online battle arena games. But just try to find the common denominator of the conceptual category of games that runs through all of them. Many games involve physical activity, such as tennis and bowling, but most board, card, and dice games do not, besides moving the pieces, flipping the cards, or rolling the dice. Games are usually something one does for fun, but as often as not, people play them with an intensity reserved for the most serious of life's challenges. Games often involve competition against others, but not so for contests against the clock, or against your previous best performance, or even solitaire. Many games involve winning and losing, but party games are designed to encourage social interaction, not zero-sum victory and defeat. Games sometimes involve skill, but many board games depend on the randomness of a die roll or a spinner, and so forth. Wittgenstein's broader point is that rules of language are analogous to rules of games, in which meaning depends on common agreement among players of games or users of words. For example, the concept of game cannot be reduced to a necessary and sufficient set of features that cover all specific examples, but we know one when we see one. How? Family resemblance, or a loose confederation of characteristics that applies to most examples most of the time. Such meanings are not demarcated by sharp and well-defined borders, but instead blend into one another across blurred boundaries. Call them fuzzy sets. Arguably, the most famous example comes from the United States Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart in his 1964 case decision, Jacobellis versus Ohio, over what exactly constitutes pornography. Quote from Justice Stewart: "I shall not today attempt further to define the kinds of material I understand to be embraced within that short description, hardcore pornography, and perhaps I could never succeed in intelligibly doing so, but I know it when I see it. And the motion picture involved in this case, this is Louis Malle's The Lovers, is not that. In his 2021 book, Rationality, psychologist and linguist Steven Pinker invokes the offspring of Robert Kardashian and Kristen Jenner as literal examples of family resemblance because even though not every scion has the pouty Kardashian lips or the raven Kardashian hair or the caramel Kardashian skin or the ample Kardashian derriere, most of the sisters have some of them, so we can recognize our Kardashian when we see one, even if there is no true proposition. If someone has features X and Y and Z, that person is a Kardashian. Most concepts have exceptions, yet we can agree on a flexible set of characteristics that roughly represents the category. Chairs are seats with legs and backs, allowing for exceptions like bar stools with a seat and legs but no back. Exceptions don't refute the rule. They help demarcate the thickness of the fuzzy boundaries. This is a quote from Carol Tavris. Some apples are not red, some dogs do not bark, some birds do not fly. But all the instances of a concept do share a family resemblance. When we need to decide whether something belongs to a concept, we are likely to compare it to a prototype, a representative instance of the concept. Which dog is doggier, a golden retriever or a chihuahua? I'd say golden retriever, but anyway. Which fruit is more fruit-like, an apple or a pineapple? Apple. Which activity is more representative of sports, football or weightlifting? Most people within a culture can easily tell you which instances of a concept are most representative or prototypical. Close quote from Carol Tavris. Family resemblance concepts by themselves are not enough, Tavris adds, noting that we must also represent their relationships to one another in the form of propositions or units of meaning that are made up of concepts and that express a unitary idea. These in turn are linked together in complicated networks of knowledge, associations, beliefs, and expectations that psychologists call cognitive schemas that serve as mental frameworks for describing and thinking about various aspects of the world. Gender schemas, for instance, represent a person's beliefs and expectations about what it means to be male or female. A mother is a woman who gives birth to a child, but what about adoptive mothers, surrogate mothers, and egg donor mothers? And Pinker cautions from his book Rationality, you can get into a lot of trouble these days if you try to lay out the necessary and sufficient conditions for woman. Indeed, just ask Matt Welsh, the Daily Wire conservative host and writer whose new documentary film asks, what is a woman? In a Borat-like series of conversations and encounters, Walsh can't seem to get a straight answer from anyone, including the University of Tennessee chair of the interdisciplinary program in women, gender, and sexuality, Patrick Grzanka, who answered the titular question thusly, quote, when someone tells you who they are, you should believe them. If a person tells you they are a woman or a man, they're telling you what their gender is, close quote. Unsatisfied with this answer, Walsh presses his subject. What is a woman? This exchange is emblematic of postmodernism's turn to obscurantism. Grzanka. Why do you ask that question? Walsh. Because I'd really like to know. What do you think the answer is? I'm asking you, a college professor that studies this subject. What other answers have you gotten? Clearly frustrated, Walsh explains that others he's queried are equally obfuscating. Grzanka. The simple answer is a person who identifies as a woman. What are they identifying as? A woman. But what is that as a woman? Do you know what a circular definition is? Of course, Grzanka perfectly well knows the answer to that question, so he pivots. You're seeking what we call in my profession an essentialist definition of gender. That's right, because essentialist definitions are examples of family resemblances, or fuzzy sets that must contain some agreed-upon characteristics, or else the words are meaningless. But Grzanka's dodge is not uncommon in academia today, and in exasperation with Walsh's persistent questioning in search of the truth, Grzanka announces on camera, getting to the truth is deeply transphobic. Unbelievable. That is just unbelievable statement. The truth doesn't matter. It's transphobic. No, this is wrong, wrong, wrong. I mean, just side note, when somebody says men can get pregnant, men can menstruate. Well, yes, if by man you mean woman. Okay, you see what I'm saying? What do these words mean? This is why I wrote this essay. In recent years, the calumny against objective truth has grown like kudzu over the ivory walls and into nearly all aspects of society, as evidenced in the many other confused subjects in Walsh's film. There's gender affirmation therapist Gert Comfrey, who explains that people are assigned a gender at birth based on genitalia. This is a girl or this is a boy. We now know that sex and gender are far more than just this binary. Some women have penises and some men have vaginas. Close quote. If so, then what do those words mean? What is a woman? She is asked. Great question. Replies the female-looking Comfrey, but then she continues, I'm not a woman, so I can't really answer that. Okay. A group of New York City women do no better, sputtering out through nervous laughter. Oh, that's a tough one. An unnamed woman offers, someone who thinks of themselves as delicate and pretty. Nice. An unnamed cross-dressing man suggests a woman is someone who identifies as a woman. And Walsh's rejoinder, but what is that, is met with, I honestly don't know. Marcy Bowers, tagged as the world's preeminent gender reassignment surgeon and who self-identifies as a woman with a trans history, in other words, male to female, MTF trans, defines a woman as a combination of your physical attributes and what you're showing to the world and the gender clues that you give. And hopefully those match your gender identity. Hopefully? Presumably that's what genital surgery aims to do. For example, vaginoplasty, in which a portion of a biological male's body is sculpted to look and function like female anatomy. But as Helen Joyce points out in her book, Trans, When Ideology Meets Reality, and in our conversation on my podcast, these vaginas do not work like those of a biological female. So such surgeries produce what is, in essence, a fleshy tube for people who identify as male to penetrate with a penis. A very male-centric view of vaginas that objectifies women as essentially bodies for men to use. For feminists like Joyce, this is a stark reversal of a century of women struggling to be perceived as more than their body parts. Walsh next turns to Michelle Forcier, a consultant pediatrician at Hasbro Children's Hospital, Rhode Island, who asserts that gender affirmation means listening to children's stories about who they think they are, because telling parents that a newborn is 100% a certain gender based on genitalia is not correct. A woman, Dr. Forcier explains, is someone who claims that as her identity. It could be many things to many people. Do gametes make someone a male or a female? Walsh queries. No, she retorts. Sperm does not make you a male because some women have penises and some men have vaginas. Right. If so, then why does a person assigned at birth as a male but who identifies as a female need to remove the penis? Why does a person assigned at birth as a female but who identifies as a male need to add a penis? If a woman or a man is whatever anyone claims is their identity based on internal beliefs and feelings instead of external equipment, as one online influencer told Walsh, some people are boys, some people are girls, some are both, some are neither. Gender is all about how you feel on the inside and how you express yourself. Then why would anyone put themselves through the ordeal of transitioning? Consider what's at stake in these medical procedures. After undergoing 7 surgeries to transition from a female to a male, FTM, Scott Nugent offered this forensic archaeological account. If someone dug up my body a century from now, they'd say, yep, that's a woman. In fact, forensic archaeologists also employ family resemblances and fuzzy sets when identifying skeletons. Now an educator and activist against radical trans activism, Nugent lists his personal reasons for caution. 1 pulmonary embolism, 1 helicopter ride to the ER, 17 rounds of antibiotics, hair on the inside of his urethra that took 17 months to eliminate, and infections every 3 to 4 months. No one would help me, including the doctor who did this to me, because I lost my insurance, Nugent recounted, adding, I'm probably not going to live very long. What about those who transition without such complications and regrets? Consider the account of Gabrielle Mack, the author of the widely read cover story of the December 2021 issue of New York Magazine. Mack is a female-to-male trans who describes himself as an asexual gay man with a penis and a vagina. After a double mastectomy and a phalloplasty surgery creating a penis out of a chunk of skin carved out of his thigh, Mack explains what all is involved in the process. If you just Google his name, you'll see the cover of New York Magazine with his picture there showing this gruesome, huge chunk of skin missing from his leg that he had made into a penis. Here he is. While I'd been sleeping, 2 microsurgeons, a reconstructive urologist, a surgical fellow, and a surgical resident, had, among other things, cut a 7 by 6 inch rectangle out of my right anterior lateral thigh. They'd taken all of the skin and fat, plus 1 big nerve and some veins attached to the muscle, and connected the skin to itself in the shape of a phallus. Then they slipped the whole thing under 2 of my thigh muscles, pulled it out of the way with a steel retractor, dragged the phallus across my groin under the skin, and pulled it back out into the world through a hole cut in the skin over my pubic bone. They connected the new penis's nerve to one of the nerve bundles in my native penis, which some people call a clitoris. Embryologically, the cells are the same, which they'd cut free of its ligaments, then skinned, then tunneled up under the skin and out to the landing site of the new penis, the base of which they joined at the base of my pelvis, putting me all together with sutures, some finer than a human hair. Close quote. One of the film's counter voices is the psychiatrist, Dr. Miriam Grossman, author of You're Teaching My Child What?, who articulates the importance of distinguishing between people who genuinely have gender dysphoria. Her estimated rate is between 1 in 30,000 and 1 in 110,000. And what is happening today, where kids with no history of discomfort with their biological sex seem to be getting swept up in a social contagion in which transgender people are not merely accepted but lionized. In this account, I link in the Substack column, one of many such stories recounted by shocked parents, a quarter, 7 out of 28, of her daughter's class claims to be trans. Sex, Grossman explains, is biology. Sex is unchanging. 99.999% of the cells in the body are marked either male or female. By contrast, gender is a perception, a feeling, a way of identifying. It's an experience. That's subjective. This graph, which I feature in the Skeptic column, you can check at michaelshermer.substack.com and then look under What is a Woman Anyway? From Gallup polling data captures what happens when that subjective experience is shaped by social influences, in this case resulting in a 100% increase in LGBT identification in Generation Z compared to prior generations. In a Pew survey corroborates the finding. Quote, the share of U.S. adults who are transgender is particularly high among adults younger than 25. In this age group, 3.1% are a trans man or a trans woman, compared with just 0.5% of those aged 25 to 29. That's a 6-fold difference. I have a graph showing that. This data gainsays the hypothesis that a more tolerant society has allowed more people to come out, because if so, we should see increases in all age cohorts, but we don't. It's possible older cohorts will come out later as society grows more tolerant, but at the moment, it appears something began to change in 2017, and that something could be a social contagion among youth to identify as something other than cisgender straight. Carl Trueman, a theologian at Grove City College and author of The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, explains to Walsh the psychology behind the contagion. Trans is cool. Trans is a way of giving yourself value. All of the things that used to give us anchors of identity have become very fluid. So new identities start to fill the void of the vacuum. Whereas in the past, I might have gotten my self-worth from being part of a village where I grew up. Now I might get my self-worth from being part of an online community or the sexual identity community. I had a trans student at Chapman University. She was 18 and decided she wanted to be a boy. In the middle of class, it's a seminar, so we all talk a lot about different things. And I asked them about their opinions on a great many subjects like these. And she announced that she wanted to change her name. She started dressing like a boy, cut her hair, and so on. And then revealed that, in fact, she was also on the spectrum of autism, had some OCD, was depressed, was being treated for anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, and so on for years. And in fact, as the semester went on, it became clear to me she didn't really want to be a boy or a man. She wanted to be trans. And she just got a ton of love and attention from this. And anyway, she ended up dropping out, just could not concentrate on her studies. This is unfortunate. With selfhood itself at stake, it's no wonder otherwise rational and tolerant people tiptoe around the topic, as evidenced in the congressional hearings over Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson, who, when asked by Republican Senator Marsha Blackburn, "Can you provide a definition of the word woman?" understood the loaded question for what it was and politely declined to answer, dissembling, "I'm not a biologist." That Ketanji Brown Jackson, along with you and me and nearly everyone else on the planet, knows perfectly well what a woman and a man is, tells us that something else is going on here, a semantic shift, a conceptual contrivance to shake us out of our Enlightenment liberal commitment to universal realism and the search for objective truth. Just as force equals mass times acceleration, F equals ma, planets travel in elliptical orbits and sweep out equal areas in equal times, entropy increases in a closed system, mass is conserved in a chemical reaction, DNA is a molecular double helical structure, and all living organisms are descended from common ancestors. In a sexually reproducing mammalian species like ours, females and males are distinctly different and should be able to be defined as such. Here is where the trouble begins and why we need fuzzy sets and family resemblances to properly capture the conceptual truth about women and men. Most people that think that sex is defined by XX and XY chromosomes, but as the Harvard evolutionary biologist Carol Hooven notes in her 2020 book, T, The Story of Testosterone, the hormone that dominates and divides us. Sex chromosomes aren't always XX and XY. In birds, for example, males have a pair of identical sex chromosomes, ZZ, and females have two different ones, ZW. What's more, many species don't even rely on chromosomes to make males and females. In turtles and crocodiles, it's the temperature of the eggs that determines the sex of the hatchlings. And animals don't always stay one sex or the other. Even coral reef dwelling clownfish is born male and sometime later switched to female. What criteria should be used to distinguish males from females? The relative size of the sex cells or gametes, Hooven explains, echoing the definition agreed on by the vast majority of biologists. Males produce small mobile gametes, sperm, and females produce larger immobile gametes, eggs. Although even here, Hooven cautions readers not to take this definition too strictly, inasmuch as my son doesn't yet make sperm, but he's still male, and although my ovaries are no longer regularly producing eggs, I'm no less female than when they were cranking them out on a monthly schedule. Rather, it's the design plan for the gametes that counts. That design plan for producing two different types of gametes is what you would expect in a sexually reproducing species like ours, so that seems as foundational a conceptual category as we're going to get in defining females and males, while still allowing for the rare outliers. As such, and by this definition, females can't produce and ejaculate sperm, and males can't produce eggs and get pregnant. As these words are understood today, we can say with confidence that women do not have penises and men do not have vaginas. Biological females can undergo a double mastectomy and get a penis carved out of a skin fold and other body parts, and biological males can get silicone breast implants and a faux vagina, but they don't work like the organs of their biological holotypes. The reason is that the family resemblance fuzzy set representing female or woman contains far more than breasts and a vagina. Look under the hood and you'll find hundreds, if not thousands, of differences with men, from anatomical and physiological to cognitive and emotional. Then I post a link to the issue of Skeptic we devoted to trans matters. However the language games play out with this issue in the coming years, and whatever the science provisionally concludes about the actual rate of trans, sans, the social contagion element, it's good to remember that trans rights are human rights and that discrimination based on sexual or gender identity, along with sexual orientation and other protected classes, is both illegal and immoral. No one should be fired for being trans, much less treated as less than human. The fuzzy set of Homo sapiens includes all of us, regardless of how we subdivide the species. In a cheeky ending to his film, Matt Walsh returns home from his gender-bending journey to ask the one person he is certain knows the answer to his question, his wife, Penelope. What is a woman? An adult human female. Who needs help opening this? She replies, handing him a stubborn pickle jar. Several female reviewers who were otherwise cautiously positive about the film took mild offense at this nod to the 1950s. But I saw it as contrived humor to relieve an otherwise deadly serious subject being driven by contemporary politics, ideological extremes, and conceptual confusions. What would Wittgenstein say? All right, thanks for listening to this episode of The Michael Shermer Show. This commentary was based primarily on my Substack column called What is a Woman Anyway? If you want to read that and go to the links and see the studies cited there, go to michaelshermer.substack.com/p/whatisawomananyway. Just go to the Substack, michaelshermer.substack.com, and you'll see all of my columns there, and you'll find it there. All right, thanks for listening. If you support the podcast, you can do so at skeptic.com/donate. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, so your donations are tax deductible. All right, thanks for listening.